Hey everybody, welcome to Do You Believe on Paranormal Zone TV. I want to thank everyone for joining us tonight, and if you have not subscribed to the show, if you would please subscribe, and also please don't forget to give the show a like because you're going to love tonight's show. We have Dave Spink, here, let me show you, Dave Spinks, paranormal investigator, and we also have David Weatherly.
And I research and investigate various things in the paranormal / supernatural, and I work extensively with my buddy here, David Weatherly, and we're doing some really cool, interesting things together, along with our buddy Mike Ricksecker.
And David Weatherly, hold on for a second, let me find you.
Strange around the world at this point, and as you mentioned, Noreen, I've written a few books. I have a new one coming out the end of this month on Sasquatch, and working a lot with Dave Spinks and Mike Ricksecker with Society of the Supernatural over the last several months. And like Dave said, we're doing some really cool things and lots more to come.
Yes, and I'm showing you 3 books, and I'm showing your picture, the Society of the Supernatural. Okay.
Cool. Thanks for having us, Noreen.
You guys are my buddies. I love you guys. So let's start the show. Now, Dave Spinks, do you want to start the show first?
Yeah, what we decided we'd talk a little bit about tonight is the Antarctica, different and mysterious and unexplained things that go on down there throughout the years, and we thought it'd be a really interesting topic to cover, and David's going to talk about some cool stuff, and I found a few things I'd like to talk about, so I'll just get it started. One of the first stories I'm going to talk about tonight is there's a story that's been going around on the internet for quite some time. It's about a California TV crew that's been missing supposedly since 2002. The story goes that this crew went down to Antarctica because they heard rumors that an underground complex of pyramids and ancient ruins had been found. Well, the thing is that supposedly this crew went down, they saw some things, filmed it, and came up missing. There was an extensive search conducted for this crew of people, and there was Navy SEALs involved. And I'll just read you guys a few of the things that I've come across on this. It says, according to archaeologist and adventurer Jonathan Gray of World Education Research Limited, there's an Archaeology News Flash that says a spokesman for the company is reported to have said at the time that the U.S. government said it will seek to block the airing of a video found by Navy rescuers in Antarctica that purportedly reveals that a massive archaeological dig is underway 2 miles beneath the ice. This crew supposedly has never been heard from again. I did a lot of research on this over the last, I think we planned this show, 2 months ago, guys?
Yeah.
And I tried contacting this company out of California to reach someone, and no one would talk to me. It was really strange. They wouldn't confirm or deny it, which I thought was strange. And I couldn't get a hold of anyone that was willing to talk to me about it. So there's rumors on the internet that it's a made-up story and whatnot, but you also see across the internet all these other rumors of this giant hole that have been circulated off of satellite feeds of this giant hole in the mountain that supposedly is some kind of alien base. So, and other things, So, this is the kind of stuff we love to talk about and we love to research. So I just wanted to share a little bit about that with you. There's also some NASA images on there that reportedly show this supposed archaeological ruin, dig and ruins under there. But, I don't know. I guess they're doing some really, really high-tech stuff with the ground-penetrating radar from space, also with infrared cameras, and they are discovering new pyramids in Egypt under the ground that are covered in sand. So, if there is something to that effect, who's to say the government wouldn't cover it up? And I find that really fascinating. So that's one of the things that's been going off. And it says that 2 Navy officers who saw this tape described its contents to National Science Foundation researchers upon their return to the Amundsen Scott Station at the South Pole. And so there's a lot of these people are making reports of this whole deal about this tape, but yet there seems to be some kind of cover-up going on. And no one's ever heard from these, as I said before, this crew of production, camera crew and everybody that were making a documentary about this. So to me, that tells me, number one, there's probably most likely some kind of cover-up if it is in fact true, and they did indeed film some things that they were not supposed to film, and they may have paid the ultimate price for it. Who knows? So I'll be doing more research on that. So I'll kick it over to David for the next little story, and then we have a whole bunch of stuff we're going to talk about for the rest of the evening.
Yeah, so really, I was just going to go a little bit into some of the history that may connect to the things that Dave is talking about. Antarctica for a long time has fascinated people, and one of the intriguing things we find connected to Antarctica is a lot of connections to the Germans and the Nazis in particular. So if you look at the historical facts, you'll find that Germany made several expeditions to Antarctica prior to World War I. And in fact, I think the last time they were there was in 1913, so just prior to the outbreak of World War I. And fast forward by the late 1930s, the Nazis were going to Antarctica. Now, one of the things that gets intriguing about this is that there are a lot of stories that have circulated and talked about the possibility of Hitler's survival after the Second World War. They did a whole series on this on the History Channel, but it's based on a lot of historical research. When it comes down to it, it's kind of there's not a whole lot of evidence that he actually died in the bunker, because they disproved that the skull that was found, purported to be his, was actually not his. So it gets kind of interesting. But even if you set that aside, if you're dubious of those claims, what you have to think about is the fact that the Nazis sent their U-boats to Antarctica on a number of occasions. Now, after the war, somewhere around 40 to 50 U-boats disappeared. They're completely unaccounted for. Now, we can say, well, a few of those may have been sunk. Some of them we know for a fact went to Argentina, because there are a lot of sightings. But there are a lot of rumors that some of these U-boats went to Antarctica. And then we get into some of the more interesting theories and possibilities that the Nazis had established a base in Antarctica during World War II, that there was UFO technology involved, which we constantly see floating around when it comes to stories involving the Nazis and their technology. What's really kind of weird is when you start digging into some of this stuff, you'll find that in the 1950s and 60s, there were a lot of UFO reports out of Chile, Argentina, and that region that involved abductions. And in these cases, there are a lot of these people reporting not only that they were abducted, but that the, quote, UFOs they were taken onto were being piloted by, quote, aliens who spoke German. There's German symbology that turns up in a lot of these accounts. They're saying that the UFOs had swastikas on them or iron crosses. And, this is stuff that was being reported in the news in the 50s and 60s in that region of the world. Didn't get a whole lot of play in the United States, but bear in mind, there was a real agenda to downplay the fact that any German officers had survived. And, they certainly didn't want to play up the fact that German technology may have made its way to Antarctica or Argentina or wherever it might have. Interesting tidbit, the Allies reported at the end of the World War II that there were 250,000 Nazi officials and officers unaccounted for. 250,000 people. Now, where did all of them go? Obviously, a percentage of them. What's that?
I said that's a lot. That's a freaking army in itself.
Yeah, it really is. And we could start kind of cutting into that number and understand that Operation Paperclip brought a lot of them to the United States. The Russians ended up with a lot of them for their programs. But, even if we cut that number, in half and then in half again, we're still talking about a lot of people unaccounted for. And it just kind of, it creates some interesting theories when we start looking at the weird accounts and encounters that come out of Antarctica. And obviously, it's not a very populated region, but it seems like every time there's some kind of expedition down there, some really strange stories start to drift back this way.
Yeah, that's what fascinates me, David, too, is because it is such a sparsely populated area, but it seems like more times than not, you're hearing all these strange occurrences, people disappearing, ships going missing. I even saw some reports on my research that numerous passenger ships, like luxury liners, had been in the area, and they reported these giant crafts coming out of the ocean and almost capsizing them. Oh, and numerous reports of this. And a couple of the ships, on one ship, it actually capsized and 60 people drowned down there. And also, I was reading, I think it was in the 50s, that the Japanese lost a ship down there with a bunch of people on it, and they sent a team of scientists to, research all this stuff that was going on to some of their shipping, the shipping lane down through that area. And that whole ship disappeared without a trace, and all the scientists were missing. With 100 scientists, they're all gone.
Right.
So, that's some creepy stuff.
Yeah, it is, David. And, I think you and I had talked about this at one point, too. It's kind of curious that a lot of countries have scientific stations down in Antarctica. Now, obviously, they're very sparsely populated. Even those stations, the guys will go in for short rotations. And, sometimes you'll hear information about various studies on the ice or the wildlife and so forth, but you really don't hear these guys speaking out very much. And when you do hear these reports, they seem to get hush-hushed very quickly. And a lot of UFO reports from that region of the world, I know that I was in Chile a few years ago and spoke to some people who had been to Antarctica. They just took a ship down there and went, off the coast. They didn't actually land, but, even they were talking about how weird things were down there, how it just feels different. And they had a UFO sighting, one trip down off the coast of Antarctica, and they're seeing anomalous lights in the sky. So there's something very compelling and very strange about this region, partially just because it's so remote, but, man, there are a lot of mysteries down there we just don't have the answers for.
Yeah, it makes you wonder, what were the Germans so interested in that place for way back when? I think me and you had discussed during that whole Operation Paperclip that there was actually a reported big battle down there between us and the Nazis, and we got our asses handed to us. And we came limping back, and there was reports of UFOs in the air during this battle and all kinds of stuff, and it was hush-hush. The soldiers were told never to talk about that. It's really
Dave, that's actually Operation High Jump that we were talking about.
High Jump. Yeah, I'm sorry.
That took place in 1946. A force under the command of Admiral Byrd left Norfolk, Virginia, and they went to Antarctica. They arrived there in the early months of 1947, and there's a lot of mystery about that whole expedition. You're talking about a lot of men, a lot of ships, and very little explanation as to exactly what was going on down there. But as you stated, there are all these rumors that there were aerial battles with some kind of flying saucers. There were a lot of people killed. It was a seaplane that purportedly, quote, crashed, and all the lives on it were lost. And the operation was ended much quicker than it was originally planned, and all of those people came back. Weird stuff. And even, when we get into the legends of Admiral Byrd, who made expeditions to Antarctica, South Pole, and other locations, there's some strange things regarding that. I mean, he talked about an opening to the Hollow Earth down there, and I know that's one of those theories that gets a lot of people worked up. But even now, there are photos that can't quite be explained that appear to show a massive hole in the ground, or something that goes into, we just don't know what.
Yeah. Okay, I got another strange disappearance that I want to talk about real quick down there. There's a story about a scientist. His name was Carl Dish, and he was a brilliant scientist that, he was down in Antarctica in 1965 doing studies and whatnot. And if you don't know anything about Antarctica, 8 months out of the year, you can't land a plane there. It's virtually impassable. So those guys that are there, once they're down there, they're stuck there for a year. So, you know, they have to stay and do their thing and survive. And the conditions are absolutely horrid. So this Carl Dish guy, he's working in a radio noise building, is what they call it. And he put out they have their own radio network through all the different countries down there that they can communicate with each other, you know, so in case one of them needs help at various camp, they try to get help. He put out a radio message saying that he was going to leave his station and go to another building. And the building was approximately a mile away. And he stepped out into the frigid night, as the story goes, and he vanished without a trace. They recorded all the variables. The temperature was 45 degrees. The wind there that night was 25 to 30 knots. And after about 45 minutes, the rest of the team began wondering what happened to Carl. He should have been here by now. And they all went out to search the area. And they formed a human train, because that's how they do it down there. If you've ever seen the movie The Thing, you know why. Because of the winds and the snow, it's a total virtual whiteout at times. And they had big giant floodlights. They scanned the whole surrounding area, and they picked up a trail of footsteps. And they said it headed west toward a runway area. And then they followed the tracks for quite some time, and the tracks just simply disappeared. Now, they knew that no planes had landed that night or anything like that. So after several attempts to locate Carl, they fired flares every half an hour and everything, trying to signal him if he needed help and everything. And they conducted 10 more searches for him. They never found his body. They still, to this day, they do not know what happened to Carl. And that's one of the type of stories that it really intrigues me. And there's a whole nother section to this story. A while later, they got this weird coded radio message across the network. And I can't remember the whole thing by heart, so I'll scroll down and see. Let's see here. Let me find it here and see what it says. He said, all right, the guy that intercepted the message name was Billy Ace. And it said, this is what the message said. It was in code, which was really weird, too. It says, I am Carl Dish. To the world, I am dead. They believe that my body is but a pinpoint frozen hard to the surface of this white continent. I say to you, I, Carl Dish, live. Do not for one moment think that this was a mistake. Everything was planned. They pushed me, tormented me, and bored me with their shallow lives. I left them behind, disowning the race called humans. On a bleak Saturday night 6 years ago, I walked out the door of Longwire Station. I never returned. They searched for me, as I knew they would, following my straight, deliberate footsteps for several miles. They never found me, and not one of them realized they had been tricked. They gave up, and I, Carl Dish, was free of them. I, Carl Dish, the most alone man in the world. It has not been an easy task to sustain myself for 6 years. At times, the endless singing of the winds almost drives me mad. I begin to long for human companionship. As quickly as longing begins, it vanishes. However, for I have been tormented, scorned, and betrayed by my fellow humans. Even those who I tried to love, yes, it seems foolhardily, to willingly subject myself to hardship and loneliness, when men such as Byrd and Shackleton so narrowly escape the effects. But my story makes theirs pale in comparison. I am a genius. In the early recollections of my childhood, I was aware that I was exceptional. They sensed it too, and because of it, they were afraid of me. I, therefore, walked away from their insecurities, paranoia, and petty jealousies. Born of ordinary folks, I lived a normal life, but only to my first birthday. Now, 25 years later, I have regained the tranquility of that first year of my life here in my shack, which shifts slowly with the rest of this continent. Soon after my first birthday, my folks were killed in a vicious Nebraska tornado, and I landed in an adoption home. nameless and without a worldly possession. There in the orphanage, I closely watched the others. Even then, as I saw them drool and shake their senseless rattles, I knew I was above them. I was not to be one of them. Perhaps even then they were plotting against me, and maybe even then Carl Dish was dreaming of getting away from these people. The pink bird which flew its painted way across the headboard of my crib. The headboard that tasted vaguely of a substance I would later identify as enamel when I rose up to lick it as all smart 1-year-old children tend to do, was to be a sign for the future of my salvation. Years later, Bird Station was all there was to be seen as I snuck my last look at humanity as I glanced back over my shoulder. When I was 15 months old, an elderly couple named Dish came, saw, and adopted me. We'll call him Carl Dish, she spoke with great enthusiasm. The agony had begun, to be continued, and they never got anything else. So that was, that's a really, really creepy and weird story to me.
Yeah, it is.
Why? I mean, he talks about himself in third person, which is really weird. Now, he could have went crazy and just wandered off in the Antarctic, but he would have surely died without any food or anything. I mean, there's nothing there. It's a barren landscape.
Yeah, it was a really weird case. Do you remember what year that was, Dave?
1965.
Yeah, early.
And you notice how he talks about Bird in there, too, which I find really strange.
And Shackleton.
Yeah.
Yeah. And, I remember that. I remember reading about that case myself. And, of course, just to point out for listeners, they did investigate. There weren't any signs of any other human tracks or predator tracks or anything else, because that's somewhat of a concern down there with the polar bears and so forth. But there was nothing like that in evidence in this case. So it was a really bizarre incident.
Yeah, and they, even then they had, they had the technology to find this guy, and they had the means to find him. They had 10 separate searches for him, and literally, they had enough manpower to find him, even if he was dead. You know what I mean? And I don't know, man. I just find it really strange that he talks. First of all, the message came in code, and he talked about himself in third person. So who knows? I mean, it's a really strange case that they didn't find anything from him. His tracks disappeared into the night. There was no aircraft. So to me, I don't know. Who knows? I don't want to estimate what happened, but it's a pretty tripped out story.
It is a fascinating case, and bear in mind that we're talking about 1965, so this falls within the time frame, the 1950s and 1960s. What we had were a lot of what I refer to as contactees. So people who were purportedly making contact with various extraterrestrials. And, the message was very different back then. It was a very different era, whereas from the 80s on, we've heard a lot about abductees and people who were unwillingly taken. What was more common back in the 50s and 60s were people who were reporting that they were making contact with intelligent beings who were giving them information, who were helping them, ascend to higher vibrations, who were telling them all these prophecies and secrets, and there's a whole wide range of these people. So that really was sort of the trend back then during that period. Now, what can we make of this message and how it was delivered? It's really strange. And as I recall, I don't think there were ever any other messages from him.
No, I couldn't find anything else on it. They call it the legend of Carl Dish. I mean, it's pretty crazy. And people had talked about it. Some of the people that actually knew him, I've read some articles that when they were interviewed about him, and they do say he was a very, very brilliant individual. Like, he was very, very smart, excelled in everything he did, and he was ranked way up there with one of the smartest men probably on the planet at the time, from what I've read about him.
Right.
So, who's to say, I don't know, man. Crazy stuff. I mean, that's the kind of weird stuff we look for right there.
Well, and there's so many weird legends surrounding Antarctica anyway. I mean, really, there are a lot of old maps that purport to show Antarctica not covered by ice.
Mm-hmm.
And, people don't know quite what to make of that. Obviously, the skeptics jump up and down and say, oh, it's wrong, or the map's wrong or mistaken. But we're talking about maps drawn in the 1500s and before. And, we really don't know because so much of the world was unexplored, by Western explorers at that point. And, there's one famous map, the Purportedly map, that was drawn by evidence gathered from the Ottoman Empire military. And that purportedly shows Antarctica, or what appears to be Antarctica, not covered by ice. Now, what's interesting about that is that when you look at all these legends and you go to South America and some of the people down in those countries, they have sort of tribal memory of a time when Antarctica was not covered by ice and that there was a civilization down there.
Yeah, they supposedly there were reports from polar explorers. They said that there was a discovery of a warming wind north of the 76th parallel, and the fact that birds and other animals were drawn in the direction of the pole. And that I was saying that they've also found gray and colored snow, which revealed volcanic ash. And then flower pollen when it was thawed, along with giant animals frozen in the ice as if they were identified as mammoths, and their bellies full of fresh grass.
Right.
So,
there's so much evidence too. I know that some of the reports that have gathered core samples from that region of the world are talking about there being vegetation and so forth under the ice. And of course, again, like Dave and I were talking about earlier, that's something that you don't really hear much in the mainstream media, and they don't seem to like to talk about it very much. But you hear these legends from various cultures around the world about civilization that was there, and as you said, wildlife and everything else. And of course, even around Admiral Byrd, there are legends that he flew over the opening to the hollow earth that was down there and saw through this opening and saw vegetation and so forth. So it's another one of the intriguing legends about this place.
Mm-hmm. Now, as far as the UFOs, were the Nazis actually building the ships on Antarctica?
That gets into a whole there's a wide range of theories about this. So there are a lot of legends about the Nazis and their involvement with some kind of alien race or getting alien technology. And, it's very similar to the recurring theme we hear about the Roswell crash and so forth, except that it's saying the Nazis actually made contact and somehow bargained or got technology from another race that helped them advance very quickly. Now, some would argue that they did have some very brilliant scientists working for them. In fact, a lot of those guys ended up working for the United States after the war and basically, developed our space program. The father of our modern space program is Werner von Braun, who was a Nazi scientist. And, it's not very much, they just don't talk about that anymore. But these people, these were guys that were developing an incredible range of technology, supersonic flight and everything else. And there's some evidence that they were trying to develop ships that were very saucer-like. The technology that purportedly is in Antarctica connected to the Nazis, all the reports say that these are flying saucer type of vehicles. Mm-hmm. And as I stated earlier, there's a wide range of reports that came out in the 50s and 60s saying that people were spotting these saucers with swastikas and iron crosses on them. And, again, we don't really know, but it's pretty fascinating when you get into those legends, and then you consider that the Nazis, they were very fascinated with Antarctica. In fact, one of the things that they believed was that one of the locations of some great masters was beneath the ice in Antarctica. So, mm-hmm. We get into these legends, you hear these stories around the world from different cultures talking about the Ascended Masters, or the Great White Brotherhood. You hear all these different terms for this race of people that have achieved sort of the high point of human potential, and they've retreated to these hidden cities. Tibet is one of the locations that purportedly these people went, but it's not talked about very often. But Antarctica was, for a time, purportedly one of the locations of a city that housed some of these people. And you get other weird legends that sort of correlate with that. In the 40s, there was a couple that actually lived in Montana, and they were putting out all of this information. It was kind of a mishmash of spiritualism. There was clearly an influence from Madame Blavatsky and other occult traditions, but they were writing these manuscripts essentially by hand or typewriter, and they were talking about a hidden city in Antarctica. They called it the Rainbow City. Now, they really kind of got out there and pulled in all the UFO connections and everything, because they were claiming that this purported Rainbow City was inhabited by people that had come from Mars, and that they had built this city beneath the ice, and that the ice basically protected their location. So, it's pretty intriguing stuff, really, when you start reading all the different things. And what's fascinating about it is that it seems to come from so many different angles, and it just keeps going through the years.
You know what? Why don't you let me call Dave on the phone?
Yeah, sure.
Okay, everybody, take a little break. I'm gonna connect the phone and call Dave on the phone. Okay.
Guys, sorry about that. It was kind of weird.
Okay, go ahead now. David Weatherly and I were talking a little bit. Who wants to come back on the conversation?
Well, I got another story you guys want to hear.
Yeah.
Okay. This was a recent story that kicked off in 2015. It's from an ex-Navy, a retired Navy engineer. The article I found on was really interesting. He says, "I saw UFOs, aliens, and top secret bases in Antarctica." And the story goes that on January 2nd, 2015, an editor of a website called Earth Files received a very unexpected letter from an alleged retired U.S. Navy petty officer, first-class flight engineer. And this guy he used to fly. The story is, to reiterate, this retired Navy petty officer, first-class flight engineer, that flew missions over the Antarctic from 83 to 97, claims that he knows there was a collaboration between humans and aliens, and that there was a major research ground base for these collaborations there in Antarctica. And he only went by the name of Brian. He did not, reveal anything else about himself other than his rank and what he did in his first name, for obvious reasons. He said that during that time period, he made several observations of aerial silver discs darting around over the trans-Antarctic mountains. And that's, I believe, isn't that, David, where that big hole has been sighted?
Yeah, that's correct.
And he talks about the big hole, and only about 5 to 10 miles from the geographic South Pole. And that was the officers that flew missions knew that whole area was a no-fly zone. And when he saw the big hole, it was during a rescue mission, and they had no choice but to fly over that no-fly zone, and that's when he saw that, that hole in the mountain. And that the alleged entrance to a human and ET science research base created under the ice is what it says. Then at camp near Marie Byrd, everything's named after that Colonel Byrd down there, just about. It says that a dozen scientists disappeared for 2 weeks there. And when they reappeared seemingly out of nowhere, he got the assignment to go pick these guys up. And he said they would not talk about anything that happened. They were obviously just really, really scared and wouldn't even say. He said you could look at their faces and they were completely freaked out. and they wouldn't talk about anything. And in the letter that was sent to this editor of this site, he experienced this darting around the mountains. His crew picked up a dozen scientists for 2 weeks previous, as I just stated, and he saw the hole to the entrance of this base in the no-fly zone. So that in itself is pretty compelling to me, and that's what for me personally, for these ex-military folks to come out and talk about stuff they're not supposed to, that's very compelling to me. They don't have nothing to gain, for this, other than sharing their experiences with the world. And you got all these astronauts coming out today and all these other high-ranking military officials saying what they've experienced and what they've seen. And these are the kind of stories that are very compelling to me.
Mm-hmm.
If he survived the war.
Yeah.
Well, there's an awful lot of evidence. I mean, everybody can decide that for themselves. There's an awful lot of evidence that he did not die in the bunker, but what seems clear to me is that he went to South America, probably Argentina. Argentina was friendly to the Nazi cause, and an awful lot of German officers and businessmen went to Argentina both during the war and afterwards. And, if you go back and look at some of the Nazi hunting groups that rose up after World War II that were chasing these guys down, they were finding them, in Argentina and Brazil and points south. So
I want
a huge German influence down there, and still is even today.
I just want to touch a little bit on this theory now that's coming out, and they're saying that they have proof because they did the autopsy fire. They burnt him, and they dug him up and they put him on fire. So how could they recognize his face? But yet they show a picture of a dead body of Hitler, and then they say it's not really him.
Yeah, well, Hitler, just like a lot of other maniacal rulers, had numerous body doubles.
Yeah, he did.
And, a lot of people don't realize that's been a common practice throughout history. Saddam Hussein had numerous body doubles that would show up and do public events and so forth. And Hitler, it was the same way. There were numerous body doubles that he had, but the body that the Russians recovered and sent to Russia, the bones were later examined, and they proved to be female. So there's little to no evidence that he actually died in the bunker.
No, and they also...
All we have are a handful of rumors, and we have a lot of other indications that he actually survived and was smuggled out of Germany. And in fact, the head of the FBI, Hoover, was getting tons of reports that Hitler was still alive. Stalin, our ally during World War II, actually called the president and voiced his concerns that Hitler had to be tracked down and made to pay for his crimes. Stalin was absolutely convinced that Hitler had survived the bunker.
Yeah, I hear that. Now, how come all of a sudden we're getting that? We didn't have it before. Hold on. Let's see, where am I? Hold on, let me check my camera. Okay, hold on. All right, I found out what that was. Now I know. Now I know what causes the echo. I just discovered it. It was on my side. Okay, anyway, so Stephen Quayle, I was watching a video with him the other night, and he said that there were FBI files that showed, that stated that Hitler did not die in that bunker, and that he escaped through underground tunnels, and then he went to the Canary Islands, and then he went over into Argentina. And right. I don't know if Ava Brown, I can't remember what he said, if Ava Brown also went with him. And then supposedly he married an Indonesia girl, and he went by the George something, Perrin or something like that is the name that he was using.
Well, I mean, that would have been huge upset to the Allied forces to know that Hitler was not dead and he escaped. imagine the most evil man in the world at the time escaping after everything, and they just wanted to put it to bed, I think. And then when all these rumors came out of he was still alive, I mean, that would have, I don't know why they didn't pursue it personally even more, because me and David were talking about that show, and they showed how he could have done it very easily.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, and there was reports of all these subs popping up on the coast of Argentina and all that stuff, numerous bases all around the world that were still active after the war was over. I mean, all kinds of crazy stuff.
Yeah.
Would the Nazis be so interested in Antarctica before, during the World War I era? Something is fishy down there. And if you take all these reports and you got ex-Navy pilots and stuff talking about things they experienced there while flying over, seeing discs flying and underground bases, and they were getting debriefed by these special ops guys that were wearing black masks, and, they didn't know who they were. And by the way, those scientists that guy picked up, they never heard anything about them again. All their equipment they picked up with them was quarantined. Everything was quarantined. I mean, something fishy was going on down there. Those are the stuff that we live to investigate anyway. I mean, it's just, I'd love to go down there, but the conditions are, I don't even think you can get down there. You got to be a pretty loaded, person to be able to fund something like that.
Is there anybody living on there?
Well, yeah,
Is
there's
the
all kinds
military?
of almost, I don't know how many countries have little bases down there.
Yeah, scientific research stations that are established there.
Some of the facts, some of the facts I read, David, I'm sure you read those too. And Antarctica contains, over 70% of the world's fresh water.
Right.
And it's about 1.5 times bigger than the United States. The ice shelf alone is 3-4 miles thick.
That's right.
I mean, it's insane.
Wow.
There's under ice lakes there, freshwater lakes, all kinds of crazy stuff. And there's a whole mountain range that's covered in ice, giant mountains.
Right.
So then, did they discover any spaceships on Antarctica?
Well, I saw some stories myself that there was a downed UFO there, and it was surrounded by like 4 tanks at one time. Now, whether that's real or not, I don't know. But there's all kind of stories like that are floating around out there.
What about any alien bodies?
No.
Nothing.
Oh, but there's talk of, like I said, that pilot was talking about that there was EBEs there, and everything else, and that humans and extraterrestrials were in collaboration down there on that base.
Now, here's something interesting when you get into that. There is a cryptid in that region of the world, and it's called a ninjin. That's a Japanese term. And you hear various descriptions of this. Now, what you hear is that it's some kind of aquatic creature. It might be a whale-like mammal, but it has what appear to be arms and legs. Now, when you go to look at the Japanese reports about these things, it gets even more intriguing because they call these things aquatic humanoids. And they're, in fact, again, I was speaking to somebody when I was in Japan about these incidents, and a lot of Japanese vessels that have been down in Antarctica, some of them doing research on whales, some of them scientific expeditions, have reported seeing these things. And when you start reading the descriptions, they're essentially describing what sounds like a mermaid. They're talking about humanoid aquatic beings that have arms, legs, sometimes fins, and they're very pale in color, but they live in the waters around Antarctica. And, these guys, we're talking about people that are very familiar with the life in that region, with the wildlife in that region of the world. So this is not something that they're simply mistaking a whale, or some other aquatic creature. This is something that is undiscovered or unknown. And when you start listening to some of these reports, some of them are kind of creepy.
Oh my! So who's report? Do they have any drawings of this creature?
Yeah, there are artistic renderings you can find on the net if you go in and look at it. It's the spelling isNingen, I believe, and you'll see a lot of various depictions. They're very odd looking. Sometimes they're drawn a little bit more whale-like, but often they're more humanoid. And again, like Dave's talking about, we get into a region where we're talking about some weird cross maybe between humans and some alien species, or maybe just some species that's lived on this planet we're just not aware of at this point, because there's so much of that region of the world that's unexplored, and really we have essentially very little knowledge from the continent.
Is that creature dangerous? Any killings?
Yeah, some of the reports talk about it being hostile, but who can say? I mean, some of these ships likely tried to catch one of the things, so
Oh yeah,
I think it would probably make it pretty hostile.
yeah. Oh wow.
I haven't seen anything where it's attacked humans or anything like that. They've mostly just been sightings and encounters, and reports from some of these various research vessels.
So if it lives in the ocean, then it must feed off of the ocean life. And does it make noises? I mean, how did they discover this? Somebody actually saw it, obviously, if they have drawings of it.
Yeah, people have actually spotted them. People on these research vessels have actually had sightings of these things, and reportedly they'll breach up on the top of the water and dive down and so forth. And it really does. It sounds very mermaid-like the way they describe these things when they're talking about them in person.
Oh my God! Wonder what else is going on over there. So there was no alien life. They only found one flying saucer. Well, then after World War II, did the Nazis leave Antarctica?
Well, we don't really know. I mean, the Nazis stayed very active and busy in Argentina well after World War II, and other regions like this that are unexplored, we don't know exactly what they were doing down there, or how long they kept active at that base. There's all the reports from the Operation High Jump Birds expedition down there that they had a battle with UFOs in the skies over Antarctica and so forth. So, something. By all accounts, it looks like something ran Byrd away from Antarctica when he was down there for that operation.
Now, what about these ruins of an ancient city that supposedly was found in Antarctica? Is that true?
Well, all of these reports, it's to a certain degree, it's speculation because, as Dave pointed out, there's either a massive cover-up going on, or it's just a matter of very little information coming out of the region because so few people go down there and are willing to talk about what they've experienced. But again, this idea of a city beneath the ice, we've been hearing this really since at least the 1940s.
Wow, interesting. Do you viewers have any questions for either Dave or David? Do you have any questions? Hey, Royce, if they have any questions, would you send them to me through Facebook? Anybody have any questions?
Someone says, Aaron Kemp says, why the Germans? I don't know what you mean by that question. We just know for a fact that, that there was numerous reports of German U-boats down in that area and everything. I mean, you can look it up you can Google it. It's all over the place. And the Operation Paperclip and High Jump, there was rumored to be all kinds of stuff going on down there. Search parties sent out to either confirm or deny if Hitler was down there or whatever the case may be. So, down in that part of the world, it's very, you don't hear reports of anything unless it's leaked by actual soldiers and airmen and sailors and people that work in them weather stations and research centers. So it's just so sparsely populated, there's no one down there to really know what goes on. So that's why it's intriguing to me.
Okay, Jeremy Legis wants to know your knowledge, any knowledge of the Vatican's role with the Nazis?
Wow. Again, a whole separate topic. There's, a lot of information that purports that the Vatican was helping the Nazis during World War II and afterwards. There's some indications that, they assisted some of the Nazi officials in escaping the Allies as Germany was collapsing. Again, we could do a whole show on it, but that's, you really get into conspiracy territory and have to sort of dig in. There is some evidence that, the Vatican was pretty friendly to the Nazi regime at one point anyway, and there were certainly certain priests that were outright assisting Nazi officials in their escape.
Oh, and they knew about the concentration camps and all the killing of the Jews as well, didn't they?
Well, sure. I mean, that's not, during the war, a lot of that was suppressed, but, the later into the war it got, the more people knew something was going on. And obviously, as the Allies started getting into the country and more reports started coming out, it became very clear what was happening.
One thing, too, that I find intriguing, the Nazis and the Germans and Nazis had a huge presence in the United States during all this time, too. And who knows how high up it went. Maybe that could be a conspiracy theory in itself of us not pursuing the whole Hitler living through the war thing. So, and then there's the whole deal where we brought over a ton of their scientists and pretty much used them to create the space program and everything else. So, who knows? You get into all these conspiracy theories of why this, why that, and why didn't we do this, or whatever the case may be. But it's all intriguing to me, so that's why we like to share these stories with you guys.
Anybody? Oh, Noreen, they wanted to know if we're going to do a show on Nazi conspiracy.
That would actually be a fun show to do. There's a ton of that stuff.
Is there?
To those. Oh, yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Well, do you have a half hour to spare and talk a little bit about Nazi conspiracy? That would be something.
Not enough.
Not enough? River wants to know, question, the diary that Byrd wrote, do they think the one that came out was actually written by Byrd?
Is she asking about the one they found, the lost diary of Byrd?
That's the only one they have, isn't it?
Yeah, there's a lot of controversy about that. Just like it ties back into this Operation High Jump and the actual information that came out of there. I mean, we've got a lot of rumors, a lot of stories. There was information from some of the soldiers that participated in that operation, but when it comes down to it, we've sort of just got a hodgepodge of pieces left here and there, and obviously Byrd's not with us anymore, so we don't know exactly what the real story is. Mm-hmm. We just have to kind of piece it together from what little remains plus the facts that we do have.
Okay, now Andrew Cox is asking this, but we did touch on this a little bit. Noreen question, if Hitler didn't die in Germany, where did he go with Eva Braun and his beloved shepherd? Now, the story is that that Hitler poisoned his shepherd in the bunker.
Yeah, well, there's a lot of indications that both Hitler and Eva Braun made it out of Germany and got to Argentina.
Yeah. They even interviewed eyewitnesses when they were small children. Remember on that show? That was very interesting, too, Dave. Right. Remember that?
Yeah, so, you've got, you can really piece together all of the various reports and form a trail from Germany all the way to Argentina and even beyond, his travels in Argentina and Brazil. And, the Nazis had established a lot of points of contact in Argentina. There was a lot of Nazi money that was sent there. There's an awful lot of Nazi gold that disappeared during World War II. And to this day, nobody knows where it went. But there were very wealthy German businessmen in Argentina and Brazil who were, building compounds and all kinds of other businesses and a lot of fronts for, for the future to hold temporarily maybe various people that were escaping out of Germany.
Yep. They directly linked several known big-time German companies in Argentina that were supportive of the Nazis. So, I mean, that in itself tells you a lot right there.
Okay, Nancy Soplavita said, do you think there's any real evidence of Hitler ever been to Antarctica?
Even if there was, no one would probably ever know because it would have been a cover-up, you know. There is a lot of evidence to point that he was in Argentina, though, and down in Nazis were, I forget how many subs they said they saw off the coast after the war was over. Several all along the coast of South America and Argentina and stuff. So there's even reported to be some sunk out there,
Right. I mean, we certainly know that Nazis made it to Antarctica itself during the war, and they were most likely there, all throughout the war. But I haven't seen anything to specifically indicate that Hitler went to Antarctica. I don't know if there's anything to that.
Oh, that's weird. That's weird. Okay, I know that's not me. Hold on. Hold on.
Is it trying to crash again?
That's weird because what I fixed didn't work. Hold on. I'm fixing it now. It went back to where it was. Alright, now we should be okay. Alright, go ahead. What's wrong? That's weird. Am I echo? I'm not echoing now.
Not now, no.
No, it stopped.
Okay. Any more of the show? Oh, Aaron Kemp just making a statement that World War II and the guy on Coast to Coast talks about people going missing. 95% is young German descent men. I find it really odd how Germans were into UFO from 1935 to 1948.
Yeah, one thing I was checking out here is in 1938, it says the Nazis sent a large team of explorers, including scientists, military units, and building crews on warships and subs,
right,
to the Queen Maud Land region of Antarctica. So that proves right there that they were, in there heavy. And they called it.
They supposedly established a base there in 38.
Yeah, they called it what? Base 211?
Yeah.
Or New Berlin, they said.
Right.
And it hosted by the SS.
Right.
Yep. And it's just all this stuff about Antarctica, I just thought would make a really cool show because there's so many things, that are pointing to something really, really strange going on down there. Let's see, it was called Task Force 68, led by Rear Admiral Richard H. Cruzen. And it included 4,700 men. Now, that's a lot of guys to send on an expedition. Okay? 13 ships, 33 aircraft. I mean, training personnel and testing equipment in frigid conditions. Well, to me, that's a little unnecessary to send that many people down to Antarctica because, number one, we can do that in Alaska, in the continental United States, or we can do it up in Canada, in conjunction with the Canadians. We don't have to send a whole bunch of people down to Antarctica. And 4,700 guys, that's a little extreme. As far as me being in the military, I've never heard of that big of a training operation to test equipment. No, not that far away and not that extensive.
Okay. Said that Admiral Byrd was declared today that it was imperative for the United States to initiate immediate defense measures against hostile airplanes originating from polar regions.
Yeah, because they were picking up all of these objects on radar, and they were, like David said earlier in the show, they were picking up all these objects coming out of the water and off of Antarctica, coming up through South America, and then they would just disappear back in the, they couldn't figure out where they would go. And all these ships were reporting all these strange objects coming out of the water, buzzing them and all this stuff, and they report them as disc-shaped objects. So when, I guess with that in mind and all the reports and eyewitness sightings, and then they went down, they went down there and they had some kind of encounter, and he was insisting that we have some type of defense measures against these things.
Yeah.
Whatever, if it was Nazis that had high-tech, weaponry, or if it was actual UFOs and aliens, who knows? But he was very insistent on that after that whole operation.
Yeah. Like David said earlier, the military's encounter with aliens, they were really fearful for future confrontations with them.
Yeah, because they pretty much whipped our butt really fast.
Yeah, and it's, face it, guys, I mean, it's a very unexplored region. We just know so little about what's down there. Like Dave pointed out, I mean, there's bases from various countries down there that are research stations, but, these guys, they'll go down to, study the seals or something, but they don't really, there never seems to be a whole lot of information coming out from these expeditions down there. And what we do get are a wide range of all these UFO reports, USO reports, unidentified submersible objects. There's anomalous lights coming up, out of the water and dropping down over Antarctica, coming up out of the ice at times. And, the cryptid reports are really strange. I mean, there's not any, it's like Dave's saying, there's not any polar bears down there, but we get these weird reports. Sometimes these disappearances claim that, that there were tracks of a predator involved in a disappearance. Well, there's nothing down there. So what exactly is taking these people? It's
interesting.
So many questions.
Oh, yeah.
One thing that I find pretty interesting, too, is there's a military operation. I was able to come across a list of former and current military operations going on down there right now. And there's one that has been going on since 1955 till present called Operation Deep Freeze.
Right.
So, that's pretty interesting, too. So, what's going on down there since 1955?
Yeah.
As history goes, and I'm sure David will agree with me on this, whenever there's been two different types of societies, and one is superior in technology and weaponry, they always overthrow the other one. Mm-hmm. And that's throughout history. And, if there's beings that come to this earth from from wherever they come from, and they have the technology to do that, who's to say they couldn't overthrow us at any second? You know what I mean? So, history has proven that over and over again.
The U.S. government made an agreement with the aliens that they can abduct as many people as they want in exchange for technology. But then, I believe it was Noria that told me that they no longer made that agreement, and that's why there isn't as many abductions as there were before. Now, what do you know about that?
Well, actually, there are a lot of disappearances. I think there are more disappearances than ever before. So,
Okay, but David, those are disappearances. I'm talking about abductions.
Yeah, but what's the difference? The abductee comes
because
back.
the abductee comes back, and they can hypnotize them. But the disappearing of people, there's no evidence that an actual alien actually abducted them. They're just assuming now. They're talking about Bigfoot that's taken them.
Well, when you start looking at numbers of people that disappear, I don't think there's any one particular answer. But some of these weird disappearances, I don't put anything off the table. Dave and I have looked at quite a number of those, and you're talking about lots of strange circumstances in some of these abductions, and as far as the whole agreement between aliens and alien race and the government to abduct people, I really take that one with a grain of salt. I mean, if they have that much superior technology, why do they need to make an agreement anyway?
Exactly.
They're going to do what they want to, regardless of what the government agrees.
Yeah, and I did hear that, though. I did, and we did talk. I had Norio on my show, and I believe we did talk about that.
Yeah, but there's not really any convincing evidence for it. I mean, it's another one of the conspiracy theories that floats around the whole, UFO world, and it's intriguing. But
Yeah, didn't they say President Johnson disappeared, and that was when he was supposed to fly to down in New Mexico and had a meeting with some aliens that landed, and that's the deal he made. That's the whole conspiracy theory on that, because he was gone and nobody knew where he was for, I think it was 24 hours or 48 hours or something.
Yeah.
So yeah, that's one of the conspiracy theories out there. That's pretty interesting, and that goes along with this whole Dulce base and all that stuff too, where they're doing experiments underground on people and in these underground super way down far levels and all kinds of stuff. I mean, but like David said, we've been looking a lot into these strange and unexplained disappearances, and there is a difference. If someone's abducted, abduction and disappearance, that's the same thing, other than some of them come back and some don't.
Yeah, right. But okay, I know we did a show on disappearances, and we talked about the national parks, but why is there so many disappearances in the national parks, and it seems to be concentrated areas like Yosemite as opposed to other areas? Why do you think in the national parks especially?
Well, it's a rural area, number one. It's out in the boonies. There's not a lot of people there, and if there is some type of entities or whatever taking people, what better place to do it? You got less chance of being seen, and whatnot like that. So if you're going to take someone, that would be a pretty good place to take them at.
Yeah.
And it could be animal, it could be mountain lions, it could be bears.
But don't forget, Dave, some of these disappearances were done right in front of people, and there was nothing. There was nobody else in sight.
All kinds of different reasons it could be, though.
Yeah.
Yeah, you've got, there's a whole mixed bag with that, because when it comes down to the statistics, when you actually start looking at them, there are large numbers of people that disappear, from cities or from their homes. They just vanish from their home and no one has seen them anymore. What gets intriguing when you start looking at the disappearances in the parks is that there are often a strange set of circumstances that people are aware of around the disappearance. And, it really comes down to the mystery of the location in some cases. Like Dave was saying, these are remote areas. A lot of these parks are built around areas, for instance, that are, the land is taboo to Native Americans. And there's long history of strange things being reported in these areas, whether it's UFO sightings or ghostly manifestations or whatever. And, these are areas that we really don't know a whole lot about the strange circumstances that surround them. So, tribal people will say, well, yeah, of course they disappeared. Look where they were.
Yeah. Well, now, David, you just wrote a book that it's being released on Bigfoot, right? Is it Bigfoot?
Yeah, that's
okay. What are they? Okay, so in this, can you talk a little bit about it? Well, I just want to know your theory on this anyway. What do you believe Bigfoot to be? Do you believe that Bigfoot is interdimensional?
Well, I think that it's a physical creature. I do, however, believe that there are some more paranormal aspects to Bigfoot, and that gets a lot of people worked up, just the very idea of that. But, this may come down to a matter of this being a creature that has abilities we're simply not understanding at this point. If a chameleon had never been discovered and people started reporting them all of a sudden, this creature that, is able to change its color to the surface that it's against and so forth, it would sound pretty strange. So I think there's something very unusual about these Sasquatch that allows them to sort of vanish. There's so many reports where people are following a trackway that just stops in the middle of nowhere. I was talking recently to the Navajo Rangers, these guys that investigate on the Navajo reservation, and they were telling me about following a trackway in the snow on a ridge, no trees or anything around, and this trackway just suddenly stopped. And these are huge tracks from obviously some type of Sasquatch type creature that people had sighted in the area, and this trackway, how does it just stop in the middle of nowhere? I mean, it didn't jump off of the mountain in any way. There was no evidence of it doing anything like that. So, I think we're looking at maybe some kind of dimensional, portal movement or something. It's really, it's kind of a whole show topic there in itself, but it gets pretty fascinating.
Mm-hmm. And what is your theory as to why a body has never been found?
People talk about that all the time, and you're talking about creatures that are living in the wild that are obviously intelligent enough to avoid humans as much as they can. And we can speculate a number of things. They may be taking their dead away somewhere. They may be burying them. It may just be a matter of odds. I mean, the population of these things is probably a lot smaller than the bear population. But how often do people find a bear carcass in the wild?
Yeah.
Not very often.
Right. Pretty rare.
Yeah, I've been in the woods my whole life hunting, and I've never come across a bear carcass. And partly the reason for that is because critters like squirrels and different animals will eat the bones as well for the calcium.
Right.
And it doesn't take no time for them to clean a whole carcass up.
That's right.
Oh.
Yeah, I've talked to park rangers in the past that have, spent their whole careers in national parks, and that's one of the questions I ask them. How often do you find, something like a bear carcass or a mountain lion carcass? And most of these guys will say, I've never found one. It's never happened. And these are people that 40 hours a week or more, they're working in a national park. They're patrolling park area. So you would think if anybody would find something like that, it would be them.
Yeah. Now, I've never talked to you about Dyatlov Pass, in the Dyatlov Pass incident, and somebody's just mentioned that in the chat room. What is your thoughts on the Dyatlov Pass incident? What happened to those 9 victims?
I'll let you take that one, Dave. I keep talking.
Oh, it's all right. My personal opinion, I definitely think it was some type of UFO deal. I think that there was numerous reports of strange lights in the sky the night before and the night of by the people that live in that area, the natives, if you will. And I think they were attacked by something, and the way the bodies were found, they actually cut holes from the inside of their tent to get out, because obviously something was blocking the door and they had to get out. So they cut holes to get out of their tent from the inside out, which is really strange. Mm-hmm. And then the way they found the bodies, they definitely encountered some type of creature or of some sort, in my personal opinion, just from reading the case file, the stuff that I've read on it and seeing the things that I've read on it. It doesn't make any sense whatsoever. And
whatever it was, they didn't even take enough time to clothe themselves, because some of them went out with no socks. Some had socks, some didn't have any.
Something really terrified those people, during that incident. And again, that's an area that a lot of people say, the locals claim that was a taboo area, that it's a place that you should not go to.
They say it was cursed, yeah.
Well, the natives won't go there because there was nothing living. There was no living animals. There was no hunting whatsoever.
Right.
And they stayed away from that area. Now they also thought it might have been the tribes, that tribe that lived in that area, but no, it couldn't have been. The bodies, and the thing about it is too,
Well, if it was just people, if I would look at it this way, if it was just people, they would have fought them.
Yeah.
oh,
They
exactly,
would have
yeah,
fought for their lives.
exactly.
If it was a creature or something that was so terrifying that they couldn't even, they had to cut their way from the inside of the tent to get out. It was something else.
Oh
you
yeah.
know, definitely something else.
Oh yeah, and they were, and the bodies were all in different types of decomposition. A couple of them were like they were fried, and then other ones, their bodies were like they were broken up, like they were in a really bad accident. Now the one girl still can't figure out why the one girl had her eyes gouged out. Oh no, one had those eyes gouged out, and the girl, her tongue was actually pulled out while she was alive because of the way the blood was.
Yeah. And some of them had, didn't their bodies were putting off some type of radioactive
Radiation.
Yeah. So that to me is very telling as well. What would cause human bodies to be able to emit radiation, and come up as radioactive? I mean, that's, to me that points with the the whole sighting of the lights, the strange lights, and what happened, and their bodies were radioactive. I mean, that to me that spells out alien, something sort of alien something or another to me.
When I did the show on that, they found either in the journal, it was a piece of paper that was left in the tent, and on it said, "Now I know." Oh God, what was the saying? Do you guys remember that? Now I know what a Yeti. Something about now I know what a Yeti is. It was something like that. And then there was also look that up, Dave. Can you find that, honey? And then also there was a camera that was found in the tent, and there was the last picture that they got off of there was this strange image that was on that film. Do you guys know anything about that, or what your thought might be?
It was some kind of orbs or some kind of. They had pictures of the lights or whatever.
It was some kind of strange image. And I showed that on the show as well. I don't have those pictures anymore. But I don't know. That is one case that I could talk about all the time because it's so fascinating, and why the bodies would be all in a different state when the snow, that ice would have preserved their bodies. Because they were in that ice and that snow, but yet some of them were like their bodies were burnt. Now that could be radiation, couldn't it be, David? When the body's burnt, looking like that.
Yeah, there were reports of readings of radiation off of some of the bodies down there, and that's part of what has led to one of the theories for what happened to those people was that it was some kind of experiment being carried out by the Russian military. But again, it's an area where a lot of strange sightings, UFO sightings are reported, and anomalous lights and so forth. And like I said, an area that's taboo for the locals to even go into because they say it's cursed.
But then why would they only take eyes from one body or one person? I don't know if he was alive. Nobody will know if he. I don't know if he was alive when they took his eyes. And why would they tear out the girl's tongue when she was still alive?
We really don't know. I mean, there's speculations that that the way the bodies were mutilated was intended to convey some kind of message, but we just don't know. It's one of those mysteries that I don't know if we'll ever solve it, really.
All right. Well. Anything else you guys want to say?
No, thanks for having us on.
Oh.
Yeah, interesting stuff. We love this stuff, and anytime you want us on to talk about any of this stuff, well, I'd be more than happy to.
Oh yeah, I love hearing. Again, everybody, David Weatherly and Dave Spinks and Mike Secker are the Society of the Supernatural. there is Dave is.
And I'll have links on all my sites. And check out Society of the Supernatural. Like Dave said, we've got some really exciting stuff coming up this year.
Awesome. Thank you guys. Love you guys, and thanks so much for being on the show.
Thanks, Noreen.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Good night, guys. Thank
Good night,
you.
everybody.
Good night. And anybody else want to shout out? Joyce Lynn, anybody else want to shout out? Night, Dave. Thanks. Anybody else want to shout out? Oh, kiss for my fur babies. Yeah, come here. Come here, Bubba. Come here. This one's Bunny. The other one you saw earlier was Luna. Say good night. Say good night to everybody. Okay, everybody. I'll see you Monday, huh? Don't forget, we got a great experiment gonna happen on Monday. So I'll see you on Monday. I see Lies. Hi, honey. Super Sims. All right, so I'll see you guys all on Monday. Please come back and it's going to be a great show. See you on Thursday for True Crime. Everybody have a great weekend. Love you guys, and thanks so much for joining me every week. I love you guys. Good night. Good night, everyone. Good night.